Chapter 8, Evolutionary Perspectives on Personality. So in this chapter, we are going to be looking at different personality traits and how they may have evolved throughout time. How much of human nature today is a result of behavior patterns that evolved as our ancestors solved problems of surviving and reproducing. So again, evolutionary psychologists believe that the essence of human nature, our behavioral characteristics, our personality, even physical characteristics, all of that has developed in such a way as they were adaptations to problems that our ancestors encountered in the environment. So we will be looking at that. Processes, evolution and natural selection. So these are the processes that are involved in natural selection. We're going to look at natural selection, sexual selection, genes and inclusive fitness, and then products of the evolutionary process. So these are all the pieces and the terms and the processes that are involved with natural selection and how we have come to be what we are now, as we say. Then we look at evolutionary psychology, like what is the premises, what are their assumptions, how does evolutionary psychology work, like from what perspective. After that, in considering all of this, the processes and the research, there are three key levels of personality analysis. So two major areas of research that evolutionary psychologists have done. So human nature, need to belong, helping and altruism, and universal emotions. So these are three avenues of research, heavily, like need to belong. There's tons of different avenues in there. Altruism, there's tons of different research going on there, and universal emotions. Okay, but those are the main ones. Then we look at sex differences, right? Because if males and females have evolved differently to, like females face different environmental challenges and mate selection and that sort of thing than males do. So in the ways that we have evolved differently to solve our own unique problems, there are sex differences, say in aggression and jealousy and in mate preference. Individual differences. This is the way that evolutionary psychologists talk about, in spite of all of these and how we've all evolved, why do we still have individual differences amongst people? So we'll be looking at, there's 4 of them, actually. I've added the 4th later in the slides. How environmental triggers can trigger differences amongst people. I'll explain this later. Anyways, there's 4 ways that they're different. Then the last section is about the big 5 personality traits, right? We talked about that. It's the most popular, what did I say? It's the most popular theory and framework for personality research, right? So what do evolutionary psychologists say about the big 5? How does it work from an evolutionary perspective? And then finally, of course, limitations of evolutionary psychology, which there's always limitations of every perspective. So we will discuss those a little bit. So first, evolution and natural selection. What are all the bits and pieces that we need to know in order to understand this perspective? All humans today came from an unbroken line of ancestors who accomplished 2 main tasks. They survived to reproduce, and they reproduced. This is the basis of everything. To survive till you're old enough to reproduce, and then to pass your genes along through your offspring. We carry adaptive mechanisms that led to our ancestors' success. So we are all made up of a million building blocks, and all of those blocks we got from our ancestors, and they were solutions to problems. Only things that were successful survived. Other mechanisms that were not successful did not and died out, and we don't have them now. Okay, so what could account for change over time and apparent adaptation to environmental conditions? So how have we changed across time, and what mechanisms have allowed us to do that? First one, natural selection. So human nature and human personality is made up of a collection of evolved mechanisms. So we know that everyone knows that Darwin revolutionized biology by coming up with his theory of natural selection. So before Darwin, there was all the philosophers, and they recognized and they observed that organisms did change over time, and they recognized that it was probably something to do with adaptation to the environment. But that's as far as it went. Darwin revolutionized biology because he's the one who came up with a theory of how it happens. Specifically how it happens, not just an observation that this takes place in the world. Okay? A very, very specific process by which adaptations are created, change takes place over time, and natural selection. Certain points that he noticed is that when animals, organisms, whatnot mate, they produce more offspring that can survive and reproduce. They know that some are going to die. Changes or variants that better enable an organism to survive and reproduce lead to more descendants, right? So little variants that happen in the genes as they're passed by, they're small little changes. And if they're a good change and they're going to help you survive, it's going to lead to more offspring naturally. Descendants inherit the variants that lead to their ancestors' success. How do these adaptations happen? Why do they happen? They don't just sporadically happen. They happen in relation to hostile forces of nature. That's what he called it. These are events that impede survival. So things like food shortages, disease, predators, things in the environment that are a threat or dangerous or that could kill you. And then certain variants helped organisms survive these hostile forces, and then they would survive. The ones that survived that had these specific attributes were alive to pass on those genes to their offspring. The ones that did not have them died. So they're out of the running, as they say. So thus successful variants are selected and unsuccessful variances are weeded out. Okay? Over time, successful variants come to characterize the entire species. So there's some examples down here. They're called adaptations or mechanisms. Inherited solutions to survival and reproductive problems posed by hostile. So food preferences. Humans have a food preference for fatty foods and foods that are high in calories and foods that contain protein. We have a natural preference for those things. And the reason we have that is because during times of food shortages and droughts and all of these things, if you are eating those types of food, you're more likely to survive because you have energy to continue living or hunting or just basic survival. Immune system, of course. Ones that have developed immune systems are going to live longer. And your immune system is going to be adapting to whatever germs or illness or disease it comes across. Fear of snakes, fear of spiders, fears of things that could be potentially dangerous. So fears that naturally keep your body away, or, fight or flight away from scary things, it's because those things could be dangerous. Okay? So those are adaptations. So that is natural selection. Sexual selection. Darwin noticed many mechanisms seem to threaten survival. Here he's talking about traits that evolve because they contribute to an individual's mating success. So males will have theirs and females will have theirs because they have different jobs when it comes to reproducing, right? So where's my antlers? Yeah, there's more here. So males, these males that develop these big, antlers, they're for fighting. They're for fighting other males. They're for fighting other males for females, right? And climbing like the dominance hierarchy. Peacocks, they have this elaborate plumage which gains attention and more likely to attract mates. So variants that evolved because they contributed to mating success, that is sexual selection. There's two forms. There's intrasexual and intersexual. So intrasexual is members of the same sex compete with each other for sexual access to members of the other sex. So traits to help win these battles. So that's intra. So they win these battles with their antlers or, what other physical attributes that have evolved that enable them to fight other males and win the females. Intersexual, members of one sex choose a mate based on their preferences for particular qualities in that mate. Those that possess valued traits mate more often. So we'll be talking a little bit more about these preferences. So members of one sex choose a mate based on their qualities. So intersexual would be females, say, fighting with each other over a particular male because that male has resources and like social status and other things that are going to, what do we say? Provide protection for her while she is having babies, right? It's a big, big investment for females to get pregnant, be pregnant for 9 months, and then for years be looking after their offspring, right? It's a huge investment for females. So they have specific characteristics that they look for in males because it's a big gamble for them, right? So they want a good mate who's going to be able to provide and protect. I think this is the last one. Genes and inclusive fitness. We talk about genes. So genes are packets of DNA inherited by children by their parents, the smallest discrete unit inherited. Discovery of the gene as a unit of inheritance led to the discovery that natural selection and sexual selection are different forms of the same process. So basically, it's just characteristics that lead to greater reproduction of genes that code for them are selected and hence evolve over time. So it's the genes that carry the codes of success, say, right? So the codes of strength and power and dominance and all the characteristics that lead to that have led in the past to successful reproduction are in these genetic packets, and that's what's getting passed along. Talks about inclusive fitness. So I think we've almost covered all the basic elements, and then we're going to build from here, okay? So this is inclusive fitness theory. It's an expansion of natural selection theory. Okay, so fitness, ability to survive in whatever environment they find themselves in. inclusive. It's not just your genes, but your relatives as well. So what this is saying is, it's not just my genes I want to pass on. My kids' genes I want to pass on, right? I share 50-50% of the genes with my kids. So I want my kids also, their survival means my genes survive. Now, my cousin is not going to be 50-50. They're going to be much less, 0.25. So I'm not going to risk myself to save my cousin who only has 0.25 or whatever lower rate it is. But I may risk my life to save my kids who's at 0.5. Okay? So characteristics that facilitate reproduction, benefit your reproductive success, so that you or your relatives can survive. So the cost must be less to you, right? The odds of saving her must be better than you dying. Okay, so I'm not going to jump into a volcano to save my sister because I'm going to die, right? But I'm going to jump into, say, a shallow river where I'm pretty sure I'm going to survive. Sure I will, and I'll jump in and save her. But if I think that I might die, then I'm not going to do it. That's what that's saying. So the formula is personal reproductive success, number of offspring you produce, plus the effects you have on the reproduction of your genetic relatives, weighted by genetic relatedness. Major advance in understanding human altruism. Okay, so I'm not going to go altruism. Are you saving your cousin, or are you saving somebody because it's the right thing to do, or are you saving them because you're saving your own gene pool? Two more slides and we'll be finished this section. Products of the evolutionary process. This first one is the most important. So evolutionary process acts as a filter for letting through only three things. Okay, so as you reproduce and reproduce and reproduce, three things are produced, get through this filter: adaptations, byproducts of the adaptations, or just noise or random variation. Adaptations, these are the ones that emerge from recurring environment interactions, solution to an adaptive problem. These are the important ones. Okay, these are the specially designed adaptations for survival, things that let you live, right? The key thing to remember that they are special designed. So the solution is efficient, the solution is precise, and it's reliable. It works all the time. You have millions of these adaptations, and they're like keys to specific locks. So the solution to one problem, there's one key. Your adaptation is to solve that very specific problem. Okay. I think the next section I have the byproducts and the noise. Yeah, byproducts are incidental effects of adaptations not properly considered to be adaptations. So your bone looks like this, and it has these edges, and the reason it looks like this is because this is going to fit into a joint. Okay, that is some adaptation to how bones and knees and everything works well to have you running and doing different things. The fact that it's this color is just a coincidence. It means nothing. It could be purple. So that's byproduct. Same thing as a light bulb. The purpose of the light bulb is to light up and provide light. The fact that the light bulb gets hot has nothing to do with its function. So that's a byproduct. Then they talk about noise or random variation. So neutral with respect to selection. Your ear is this shape. This is here because it's catching sound, right? Why is this here? No reason. Okay, it's just random. It just happens to be this droopy piece of skin that just hangs there. It serves no function other than you can pierce it. So that's random variation. It just happened. and it doesn't cause any problems. So it's going to stay there, right? There's no reason for it to disappear. So it's probably just going to be with us. Okay. Oh, and that is the end of section 1, evolution and natural selection. We are at 20 minutes. So I am going to stop right there. I will see you in the next video.